What's up, team? Sean from Invest to Live here, and this is actually the most exciting video I've ever made. I put a lot of time into thinking about this. I've built out a deck for this. I really am really excited to share this with everyone. If you are thinking about starting a company, an entrepreneur in process of raising capital, working on your first startup, your 10th startup, or you're the CEO of a global Fortune 500, you need to watch this video because I want to have you completely shift and change the way you think about the business of moonshots, gigantic world-changing ideas. Whether your goal is to become a trillionaire, which is very possible in the years to come, or build a trillion-dollar company, or help billions of people get better lives. We're going to talk about all those things in this, and we're going to talk about it through the lens of how we take many steps in reverse to solve for mission-based problems. That is the secret to building a trillion-dollar company that no one else is talking about, largely because they don't understand it. They haven't built companies in the past, and they also misunderstand the way technology combines with technology to extrapolate value that's not currently available. I just want to call it out that this is not a fluff exercise. As always, I don't sell anything. I'm not doing this for any other reason than I love to share, and I would really appreciate any support you can help me in getting this one out. I've put a lot of time into it. But I want to start with something first. I truly and honestly dare you, and I really mean this. I know I'm going to get the trolls and all this silly stuff. Who cares about them? Get the clowns out of here. I dare you to put your idea for a moonshot that you really will take action on down below. Call it out, and then come back and tell us what you're working on. Find us on Twitter at the Invest to Live. I'm telling you that this is the opportunity to think differently, change the way you do everything in your way you think about startups, entrepreneurship, raising wealth, helping people, and changing the world. So I'm not going to waste any time with fluff or getting started here. But again, I dare you to do that below if you've got the guts to put it out there. If you don't have an idea, I want you to say, hey, I don't have an idea, but I'd like to solve this problem. I'd love to talk about it with you and maybe have you on and talk about how you're going to solve it, or we can talk about how we can solve it together and think about it. So the other big piece of this as well, before I jump into it, is you really have to take yourself out of the box of normal everyday living. And remember that in the 1980s, if you walked into a car dealership and there's a GPS in the car, you'd think they had tinfoil hats on because that's crazy. Computers don't talk. In the 2020s, when I'm making this, if the car doesn't have a GPS in it, I'm saying, what the heck, you're ripping me off. Why don't I have a talking computer to tell me where to go and which turn to take? So we have to build on ideas that exist and build big, huge ideas, okay? So I'm going to share my screen. We're going to jump right in and not waste any time whatsoever. Excuse me. Okay, so first thing I want to do here is I want to share my screen the right way here so we can get a presentation mode up. Okay, so here's what we're doing. We're talking about thinking bigger and then add even more to that. We want to think massive at a global scale. Okay, this is a big deal and this matters. So what are we talking about? We're talking about building moonshots. What is a moonshot? Why it's important, and why you as an entrepreneur need to think at this global, massive universal scale, right? We're talking bigger than Earth, bigger than our local universe, right? Let's think as big as we can in what we're trying to solve for. So we're going to answer a couple of questions today. Oh, of course, the formatting came out wonky, but that's okay. Hopefully it still looks okay on your end. We're talking about moonshots and what you need to know. So we're going to go through a couple of different things here. What is a moonshot? How do we think about a moonshot? The process to succeed in thinking about and executing on this. And then I want to ask some tough questions like, can anyone actually do this? What are some of the risks? And then how do we think about global and future trends? And I've got some examples I've included in here, nothing too extraneous, and trying to really make it as real world as possible. But I got to be honest with you, I'm actually so excited, I'm like giddy to even talk about it. So first and foremost, what is a moonshot, right? On the left-hand side, I just grabbed some pre-made, artwork here, so to speak. I don't know this dude, but, when we think about the iPhone, I mean, I've got literally, true story, I've got like a work and a personal iPhone on my desk right in front of me. I'm on an Apple computer, and I've got my work Apple computer next to me. And I think about it in terms of, a moonshot is an idea that is so big, it seems almost out of this world or impossible. It requires certain other technologies to exist or to be created often to be accomplished. When moonshots succeed, we see global levels of success, wealth, and impact. And the reason why I want to talk about the difference here between success, wealth, and impact is because you have to understand that even if only one of those is your goal, all three of them kind of have to happen, in order to make this really big. The success part matters because you need to have something more to yourself. You have to have a personality to really deliver this idea that's so crazy to get people to believe in you. The wealth has to come for those who invest in it. To take the risk and the chance on your moonshot, they need to see something returned to them. Because look, the future billionaires are investing in your trillion-dollar company. And the impact is the most important. How widespread is the impact we're having on humanity? We're not talking about making a slightly better toothbrush or a hot dog stand that has 8 locations here. And there's nothing wrong with those. Those are great entrepreneurial ways to look at things. We're not talking about that. We're talking about massive. So I just thought this picture of, a guy working on an Apple computer being looked at through this Apple phone so defined the way I live my life. I wanted to share that as a great example of like, my gosh, I grew up in the day where like, if you had a 10-foot coil cord on your phone on the wall, you were like, my God, the life of luxury has reached my house. I can actually leave the room now to talk on the phone. I can go in the next room over. And now I've got two telephones on my desk. My kids have no idea what a payphone is, and very few people probably will in the next few years. So this is why I say a moonshot has to be something that quite literally wasn't even an idea that was thought of as being existing or possible or could have ever been done before. We're going to get into the way this works. I like to really think a lot about this idea of what it is and what it could be, right? Before your idea, and then when your idea is now in existence, okay? I just threw a couple of randos in here. And again, I've got this weird formatting when I shared my screen. I'm not sure what's going on, but I hope it doesn't distract anything here from the real value that I want to deliver. But, before the idea, I think it's important to understand, things are fine, but could they be better? Do you have an inkling in your brain somewhere, an itch that you can't scratch, that you just know there's a better way to do it? Is it self-driving cars? Is it automated and augmented robots? Is it something completely different like telemedicine? Or is it a phone that can take pictures and deliver the internet on it? Is it putting satellites up into space in bigger ways, right? Is it delivering an operating system into a computer in the 80s? It could be anything, but it's got to be something that's so big it qualifies to be a moonshot. And I'm no expert on what qualifies or doesn't qualify, but you want to think as big as possible. Big is the key, right? What aspect of humanity is fundamentally in need? We look at things like world hunger, energy crises, war, violence on women, violence in schools. We need to find ways to solve these problems, and we need to think way bigger than just what's available today. The same old conversations that we fight about in politics and on the news and on social media, I'm sorry, it's not enough, okay? It's time to think way bigger than just the today problems, right? I don't know what those are either, but you know what? I've got some ideas, and I bet you do too, on how you would solve it. If I took away all the restrictions in the world and said, suppose we had every piece of technology you needed to solve this problem, well, what could you build? Let me know below in the comments again if you think of something. And then again, this really speaks to the point of like, what isn't possible today, but could be possible soon. Maybe the right piece of technology just got developed by another company that you can finally use to build your moonshot. Maybe you can define and build that as part of the process of your moonshot, okay? The way to really approach this as well is once we get past the before the idea, well, what will happen now that I have this idea, or if I can succeed? Everyday lives and thinking will shift forever. I expect a GPS to be in my car. I expect my phone to be connected to the internet. I expect to have satellite access to data all over the world, right? Now, because of my idea, maybe even more moonshots are available, right? I'll just use Bezos and Musk as an example. Their ability to do reusable rockets into space means that the idea of human travel is that much more possible now. And maybe that means the next step beyond that, and beyond that, and beyond that. Everything from research to life to expansion. It's about you and how you interpret what you could do with that information. So when I think about this idea, I'm thinking, what cures can I come up with? Can we get further into space, push human longevity, and so much more is able to be reassessed because of your idea, something that you've done that's expanded the world, the thought, everything behind what you're working on. Now, what's more is the process can sound insanely difficult and quite literally too big for a lot of us to think about. But the truth is, it's actually really obvious. But I'm going to call it out. It is really difficult. This is why, although we love to scream and yell at entrepreneurial billionaires and how evil they are, and they've built these trillion-dollar behemoths, hey, I get it. But it unfortunately does take this massive global way of thinking and level of wealth that gets tied up just by adherence to the way stocks work, really. If I build a company that solves a global problem, it's going to be a giant company. And since I own it, I'm going to end up being wealthy. You can hate on the people all you want, but the reality is the level of good and things that are often delivered from it are being missed by the masses. So this is not a video for the masses. This is a video for the people who are out there trying to build big, massive, humongous organizations who don't have time to think about whether a politician's talking about them on Twitter or their next door neighbor doesn't like that they're doing their, come out of their house once a week, right? I was thinking about this morning. I haven't had a haircut in like 3 months, and I had to literally take a shower before this call just because of how bad my hair looked. But I can't escape. Once I start working, I can't leave the things I'm working on. And so I stole this example right out of the place where I got this. And it was really talking about this idea of like, how long it's taken to get where we are today. And I want to bring this back to this idea for anyone who's watching this. It is okay to both acknowledge that it's obvious how we solve moonshots while at the same time being difficult. So I like to break things down into steps. Every time I have a problem, I break it into steps and I reverse engineer my solution. So as an example, if you work in sales and you have a quota, you might figure out how many products you need to sell, how big of a product you need to sell, how many times, how often per week you have to close a deal, how many deals per year you might have to close. But it's a very natural thing for people who work on quotas to have this mentality. And this mentality is really what's called a mission-based mentality. This means that you aren't building a company to solve for radio or to solve for clean teeth or to solve for health or to solve for space travel. You need to have an actual measurable goal that you can build everything off of, your North Star for your entire company. Every big company in the world has this. They don't always publish it, but they all exist. If you are trying to put satellites into space, it has to start with, mission 1, how do I get a reusable rocket? Mission 2, how do I do 2 satellites at a time? Mission 3, 10 at a time. Mission 10, right? 2 rockets inside of a rocket. I don't know, right? But the idea is you have to have mission-based real metrics. It can't be help companies increase sales. That's meaningless. That provides no ROI, no value, either to yourself or to the people around you. What if I said I wanted to build the first livable space on the moon? Well, it starts with understanding, well, what would it take to make the moon livable? And once I understand that challenge, what would it take to actually get things up there to build with? How hard would it be to do that? Could I leverage technologies already built? You have to break it down into steps and mission-based numbers, right? In order for 5 people to live on a moon base, they have to have this amount of oxygen per month. It has to be delivered this often and in this kind of a format. It has to be done with this much weight, with this much precision. When I understand all the numbers and the metrics, I can back into it. If it's not possible, I have to work on the technology and the process. If it is possible, I have to work on the partnerships and getting into where I need to be there. But this is a really good example below where when we look back at where we are today with like 5G technology, IoT connectivity, we talk about these things sometimes like, yeah, it's easy, right? We have devices. My washing machine talks to my phone and my fridge. But it starts in the 1980s, right? Where analog cell phones let people talk to each other. Pretty basic, right? No big deal, right? We think of this as just nothing. And this isn't meant to be facetious. I mean, literally, like you can make a phone call pretty easily to someone in the 80s, of course, I know that. But then in the 90s, we start to see new features like text and voicemail. They'd be able to send messages, or even for those who remember the old Nextel phones that went, beep, beep, and you could talk to each other like a walkie-talkie. In the 2000s, we saw mobile data let users browse the internet. This is when things really started to change. And all of a sudden, connectivity, the ability to work on the go, the ability to work anywhere, shifted. Everything in the world shifted just because of these little things here. Right? In the 2010s, we saw LTE offering faster speed, more functionality to mobile devices. And then today, we've got 5th generation tech that allows more connectivity, faster speeds, more areas of access, more things we can do, better video, better streaming, better everything. This is what it takes sometimes to get there. Now, in the 80s, there's a lot of things we couldn't do that are around today because we didn't have that tech. In the 2000s, the same. Now the question is, now that we have all this ability to do so much power from this little thing right here, what can't you really build, right? You just have to work backwards. So let's have kind of a hard conversation. I sometimes do this during my actual presentations at work, and this is a little bit of a joke I want to throw in here. I threw in a meaningless chart on the right-hand side here, and I left it there because I just feel like sometimes I think people love visualizations so much that even when I'm talking about a moonshot, I want to present some growth, even in a presentation where I'm not talking about the idea. So there's a little tip of always having some sort of a chart to speak to. But here's the reality. Can anyone really build a moonshot? I'm going to be really honest here, and whether it gets hate or not, I don't know. But the truth is no. Unfortunately, this is not the case. Um, Again, my formatting is cutting letters off, so I totally apologize. But look, there is a definite requirement for unbridled thinking and perseverance that I'm going to rewrite what I wrote here. That is mandatory to overcome insurmountable obstacles. The reason I say this is you're not trying to build a better hardware store where you can charge 5% less for your products. You have to come over the gap of getting and understanding that you are not going to be able to easily raise capital. Banks aren't going to talk to you. VCs are going to think you're crazy. Your friends and family might think you're crazy. Your idea might sound more like a tinfoil hat exercise than an actual business. You might have no experience in what you're trying to solve for, and people don't take you serious. Those have to be totally meaningless to you. I'll speak to just myself for a second here. I'm working on two specific things right now that I'm not ready to talk about publicly yet, but I will be pretty soon. One has to do with deep integrated next level AI and integration, and really looking at and understanding how we tie better neural nets back to executable workflow based AI. Okay. I'm talking like really next gen stuff here. Predicting, prescribing, and narrating real-time events at a global scale. This is something for 20 years I've been really into. I've really been working hard on, and I'm still taking time to get there. But I needed the technology to get to where it is today to explode this idea forward. The other thing I'm really thinking about is, what can I take advantage of in terms of this? I don't want to call it a space race because that's the wrong word, but now that we have technology to get off planet, I'm really looking at how do I get in and start to understand leveraging what I'm building within my AI stuff and applying it to sort of this new interplanetary approach or the space expansion exploration perspective. So the problem is I don't talk to a lot of people because they're like, well, you've already done really well. Why are you worried about this, right? Well, I can't not think like this. It doesn't exist for me. If you're like me and you wake up every day and you're like, I need to solve this problem X, it is so big and so massive that I just think about it all the time. My best advice is to put it on a piece of paper or in a spreadsheet or anywhere that works for you and break down the 100 steps. And if you're serious about your idea, you'll do this. Break down the 100 steps it will take to get to solve that problem and get as granular as possible. If 100 is not enough, you're in great shape. If you can get to 200, 500 steps, oh my gosh, you're probably going to succeed. The hardest part is thinking about a massive idea in teeny tiny shreds or fragments. And when you tie them all together into a string, you start to accomplish different pieces. Now, here's a great part about this idea too. You might be able to build 5, 10, 15 businesses out of this idea. So just something to think about there, okay? Now, one thing I want to call out that I think is majorly important to understand. The ability to do this is not for everyone, but it has nothing to do with your IQ. It has nothing to do with being the smartest kid in every class or the CEO of a company. And let's be honest, those are not always the right people in the first place. This is really about the ability to get through tough times, no matter what comes your way. I think about the people who are most likely to achieve moonshots are those who have had the tougher lives, those who've had to persevere through lack of food, not having money, rent is late, sleeping in a car, right? Tough times make tough people, and tough people make moonshots happen. And they know how to get people on their side, and they know how to raise capital when it's tough, and they know how to aggregate resources and build their network to get things done. So I just want to call all that out here, that this is so much more than just thinking big. It's about thinking big and getting people to think like you and believe in what you're thinking about. So don't ever for a second say to yourself, I don't have a PhD or a master's or an MBA. I could care less. That stuff is meaningless to me. You can hire those people to work for you after you build your moonshot, okay? So please keep that in mind. But if you give up easy, if you think homework is too hard, you're stressed out with your 40-hour work week, listen, nothing wrong with that. You have every right to feel stress. Building a $1 trillion company that's going to put people on the moon or solve world hunger, maybe not the right thing. That's okay. Nothing to feel bad about there. So what are the risks? Well, I think it's been pretty obvious to this point, right? Massive amounts of time and capital. These are massive ideas and they require massive change. And all these things require massive capital, work, and time. This means you're dedicating your life, your time, your energy, all of your money into solving for something that has an insanely small chance of succeeding, right? And the biggest challenge with most moonshots is you never even hear of them because they end up fizzling out completely, ending up with nothing to sell or to capitalize on and leaving you with nothing from the get-go. So how do we even approach the idea of a moonshot differently? I don't hear anyone else talking about this, so that's why I made this. I'm not trying to steal anyone's idea. So if there's other people doing this, I'd love to be in touch with them and we can work together, frankly. But can we think about this approach differently? And I think a great example is what Elon is doing with Tesla, actually. So Tesla is a company of huge ideas, right? They've got the Boring Company, the cars, the roofs, space, satellites, reusable rockets, the robots, the AI, the FSD, all these things. I think Tesla's done a great job. And by the way, I really don't care if you like Elon or Tesla or that I'm talking about him. I think if you can't see the value in what they're building, stop watching this video. I could care less about whether you watch it or not. This is not for people who don't believe in big things, okay? I'm not trying to get enemies here or have people dislike me. I'm actually a really nice guy. But please, enough with this nonsense of trolls constantly talking about how evil everyone is and everyone's a bad person and Tesla's a joke who's going to go out of business. Just stop it, please. Okay, stop it. This is about looking at what other people are doing that's working. If Tesla was not throwing off the cash that it's throwing across all these different areas, it wouldn't be able to build and do all the things it's doing. By the way, with someone in charge who's putting all their time, energy, and capital into the projects as well. What Tesla's done well, and I want to reiterate this, is on the path to building whatever they're building, which I still don't think we really know yet, which I love, by the way, but you can start to put it together, solving some energy issues with cars, solving for AI, self-driving and automation, moving into space, more satellites for connected data, even fighting over Twitter. There's something big a brew here, right? If you can productize things on your way to your moonshot, that's the best way to achieve your moonshot so that it becomes self-funded throughout the entire process. People will want to throw money at you to be involved in what you're building. I think it's important to recognize that as well. So here's a big part of this, right? How do we see beyond today to the global and future trends and needs of tomorrow? Okay, so these are just a couple of random ideas that I think about on a regular basis, but I encourage you to do the same, to start putting this stuff down somewhere so you can go back and reference it if you get excited about it. I also want to call something out too that's really important. There's nothing wrong with not being the person that builds the moonshot. You have every opportunity to invest in these companies, to believe in these companies, to support these companies. This doesn't necessarily mean you're providing startup capital or venture capital or angel funding. This could just mean that there's public companies that you think are doing great things and you invest in them, right? That's how you support them. You use their products and services. But like a couple of things, again, to get back on track that I'm really looking at is like things like, interplanetary life. Well, in order to do that, I need to understand like what is the work today that's been done on large deployable and reusable rockets so we can actually send materials to another place and then get people to those places so they can build those materials and then ensure we have the systems in place, the backup in place, the life cycle support in place. What about augmented robotic AI as an example of something we really could have more people in this space doing big things, right? Well, we have to start to leverage tech across multiple industries, build a better and more complete solution, right? I think we've got, excuse me. The allergies, by the way, today, there's like plumes of green pollen going past my window. When I say leverage tech across industries, what I'm saying is we have companies like Palantir with awesome integrated AI solutions. We have companies like Tesla who are really looking at robotic AI, self-driving and automation. We've got lots of other companies that no one's ever heard of, frankly, that are in the private sector that I see a lot more often than probably the average person, who are trying to solve for the interconnectivity between these sources, or what they call deep in stack technology. These are the things the average investor will never hear about, will never see. These companies tend to get bought when they're small because they're buying their brain power. But there's a lot of things that has to happen to actually make things work, whether it's packet failure on an internet streaming device, or it's some teeny tiny connector that exists to make data flow faster between two different servers. These are the things that exist that you can pull together as an entrepreneur to fix and solve for the bigger problem. But it starts again with that network and that ability to think differently. If all you're ever looking for are nails, you're only ever going to need a hammer. But if you don't know what you're looking for, you can bring a whole toolbox with you. The other big thing that I want to talk about again is this idea of like hunger in medicine, right? How do we leverage global distribution with scale and better outputs with technology, right? How do we make food that's more sustainable and can be easily shipped? How do we use better sources of energy to do more? How do we scale this out to its users? How do we use telemedicine and satellites to deliver quality healthcare all over the world? That's the way you get to start thinking big, 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 bigger, 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 bigger still, right? Get excited about it. And the other piece here too, I want to really call out, let me move this out of my way here, is, how does this impact individuals' daily lives, right? And I call this out because for me, it isn't my goal, but I want to call this out for everyone who's like me. If wealth, I'm sorry, listen to me. I completely said the opposite of what I meant to say. Wealth is not my goal. I already do fine. I don't care about building any kind of wealth for myself. I can't stop thinking big. It's in my blood. It's in my brain. It's everywhere. If you're like me, you're already super motivated and going to persevere anyways. But that said, there's absolutely nothing wrong with wanting to be massively wealthy and use your money to keep building and building bigger things and changing lives. So if wealth is your number one goal here, you can still build a moonshot and do something huge. So I wanted to put this page in specifically for those who are really looking at the wealth aspect of this. So this is an area I'd say really pay attention for a second. These are really near-term things that I think have massive, massive opportunities to build huge, successful, very well capitalized companies near term that are still pretty much moonshots, but maybe not quite as extreme as, space and robots that talk to us. So like number one is like improve services, right? How do we change lives for better at a global scale? This speaks back to that sort of telemedicine, better ability to ship and translate agriculture from one area to another, the ability to store it for longer periods of time, different practices or processes for freezing, right? Using technology that you're not, like, this isn't about just crop yields. This is after we get a better crop yield, how do we get that yield to where it has to go and keep it fresher? So if you're approaching this as like, I want to come up with a way to make crops 10% higher yields, that's not a moonshot. That's a great idea. That's a good company. It's not a moonshot. The moonshot might be reassessing how we freeze food today. And if there's a better way to do it that you have, because you've seen it in some other example of an industry you work in, right? More efficient energy consumption. This is going to save the planet and will save lives ultimately. So if you can solve for this, this isn't necessarily about recreating new sources of energy or energy on the edge. This is what can you do to look at better efficient energy consumption and get it to more users. That's still a massive, massive global company. And then furthermore, the biggest one really is this idea of remote healthcare. How do we get more people to get better healthcare, connected devices, leveraging things like the satellites that are already in the air and the tech that you're going to build to better integrate and operationalize around all of those things? So who can help capitalize and grow the idea? Well, I think one of the biggest challenges here in this space, if I'm being honest, is that a lot of people don't understand this idea of public and private partnerships. This is where you're working with governments to help you raise money, to help you build this huge idea. And this is also why building wealth as the sole goal isn't important, because we can worry about that when it comes later on. The goal here is to think about what services exist, departments of XYZ, semi-governmental agencies exist that are trying to solve these problems and how you can help get funding from them, grants, et cetera, to get the ball rolling. So you got to think out of the box here. This isn't asking friends and family or VCs or private equity. This is also looking at other sources like public funding and semi-public funding as well. I know Bill Gates is not loved by a lot of people. I think he still is a genius. I think, maybe he's gone off the rails a bit, but I wanted to share this quote because I think it really applies to everything we talked about here. The advance of technology is based on making it fit in so that you don't really even notice it. So it's part of everyday life. I think this goes back to my GPS thing of, I just expect there to be a GPS or a touch screen or something smart in my vehicle at all times. I expect my phone to connect to the internet. I expect certain things to happen. That's the way you got to think about this, is not only how do you get to that gigantic, massive idea, but how do you integrate it into daily life for everybody. And what I would just simply say here is if you have any questions, hit us up on Twitter, leave a comment below. We'd love to talk more about this. If there's people who want to do a podcast of people who are building moonshots, I'd love to talk on it. Love to talk to anyone who's doing it. So with that said, I really appreciate everyone listening. This was great to do. I'm really excited to share this information. I hope somebody out there gets some degree of value from it. So with that, I'm just going to say I'm out. Thanks so much for watching. And, everybody have a great day. Good luck with your moonshot out there.